like many before me, and like many who still believe in the promise of our greater self, I have devoted myself to a simple and stubborn, if profound, idea that our nations could become the authors of a new chapter of history, rather than remain its objects. And it is in this spirit that today I wish to speak to you directly, with candor, with responsibility, and with lucidity. 6 years ago, as leaders from across our greater South came together, entered into communion on behalf of their peoples to create what was then the OEC, I was bestowed the greatest honor of my life by being elected to serve as the first Secretary General of this nascent intergovernmental organization. And with my election came the humility of knowing all too well the responsibility contained within the honor, that of becoming worthy of the trust of which I was asked to be the custodian, to give answer to the aspirations of our peoples, for which a collective had just been formed, to ensure, without equivocation, that ours would not be the fate of testimonial initiatives relegated to the noble, yet forgotten, pages of history. And since then, I have spared no effort, made no economy of commitment, withheld no part of myself in the devotion demanded by this trust, and in service of the fundamentally human dimension of our shared ideals. As Secretary General-elect, as the world that we knew, the certainties that we had, the predictable tomorrow on which we relied, all came undone with the advent of COVID-19 within weeks of our founding summit. I appointed and presided our organization's Constitutional Preparatory Committee, as we denied ourselves any indulgent excuses that could delay getting our collective off the ground. As the pandemic outlasted all predictions of the time, our constitutive charter not yet having entered into force, and no budget having been allocated to our preparatory phase, we faced and soldiered through with the support of a handful of committed individuals who firmly believed, against all odds, in the eventual triumph of our endeavors, a financial crisis that we successfully overcame by sheer force of righteous will and strength of conviction in our common dreams. As national assemblies were not meeting and the resources of our governments were entirely focused on the imperative of overcoming the global, multi-dimensional crisis that we were all suffering, we ensured, by working closely with member states, that our constitutive charter entered into force on the 18th of May 2021. That is, less than a year and 4 months from its adoption, yet in the midst of an unprecedented pandemic. As the certainties had gone, and as the uncertainties of the pandemic raged on, the threat of travel restrictions omnipresent, the talks of potential new lockdowns ever more frequent, we convened in December 2021 our inaugural General Assembly, where I officially took office for a 6-year term, taking the solemn oath to exercise in all loyalty, integrity, and selflessness the functions and responsibilities entrusted to me as Secretary General, in service of the member states and their peoples, and with the interests of the organization only in mind. As the inaugural General Assembly did not select a host location for the organization, and with the impossibility of appointing a secretariat without a base, we channeled our focus on reaching an agreement to establish an international seat for our collective. Efforts which led, less than a year later, in November 2022, to the signing with the government of Ethiopia of the agreement establishing our headquarters in Addis Ababa. And within less than 2 months after that, by January 2023, as I appointed my first cabinet swiftly, perhaps even too hastily, we moved to our new host country. With the building allocated to us in need of renovations, and with no other location from which to work, we first improvised hotel lobbies into offices as we commenced the work of building an international secretariat from scratch. And then, with a fast-growing multinational team and an institutional culture still being built, we moved to ill-suited, rented open space offices. Yet, in parallel, again without indulgent excuses, we also oversaw the renovation of our headquarters building and inaugurated it less than 5 months from our arrival in May 2023. In June of the same year in which we effectively became a secretariat, we convened an extraordinary General Assembly, at which its first president was elected, and at which the member states agreed, by consensus, to rename our collective, that it could bear the name of what it has always been at heart: an organization of Southern cooperation, one which, unwavering in its commitment to embody a new multilateralism, based upon equality amongst parties, equity in sovereign relations, and solidarity instead of charity, would be in a position to catalyze the collective construction of the third way of development called for in our Charter, to which our peoples aspire, and that humanity in its entirety deserves, requiring whole of government, whole of society efforts and endeavors. We hence expanded our state membership, for in numbers there is not only strength, but there also lies the key to the realization of our aspirations, by bringing our capacities together, by pooling our resources in common. We simultaneously activated our Conference of Associate Members and expanded it, enshrining the role of academia and civil society inextricably within the realization of our bold vision. In sum, when I took office, the OSCE was merely ink upon paper, supported by only a handful of full staff members. Since, we built an institution with a secretariat that is over 100 strong. We are an organization with active governing bodies and a growing interest in state and associate membership. But the priority was not and never was there. It was always, as it still is, to ensure that our organization would make a tangible, lasting and continuous difference to our world, to the hundreds of millions of people that we serve every day. But most important of all, we have collectively become a positive force of change, with tangible programs to transform our world, amongst which, to only name a few, the Greater South Information System, launched in February 2024, that is democratizing access to and the production of knowledge across our Greater South, and already provided access to over 400,000 digital knowledge resources to universities and research centers in our member states by December 2024, months from its launch. Or the OSCE Institute, launched in January 2024, that is building the national and institutional capacities of member states and associate members, that they may become the protagonists of the development leap that we are targeting, and from which the experts of 16 countries have already graduated. Or perhaps I would mention the framework to reinforce exchanges between youth and regions through education, Freire, that aims to encourage, facilitate, intensify South-South student and academic mobility, and through which we have already been able to secure, with our partners, over 500 postgraduate scholarships in Brazil for our citizens and youth. Or perhaps the Festival of the Greater South, an annual, popular get-together, building beyond South-South cooperation amongst governments, South-South integration through people-to-people exchanges, and co-creation through the universal, vibrant spirit of culture and the arts, demonstrating that ours in the South are indeed living cultures, and our peoples are peoples in motion. The Greater South Fair for Endogenous Technology, GRESFET, whose first edition was held in December 2024, to provide a platform to our innovative youth and accelerate the development of homegrown technologies in our countries, that we may bridge the techno-digital divide, not only in terms of access, but in particular, between technology producing and technology consuming countries, so that our countries can, instead of remaining passengers, become drivers and shapers of the digital revolution. And finally, amongst other implemented programs, as an illustration, the establishment of the Common Leveraging Union of Borrowers, the Club, in 2023, and its entry into operations in June 2024, effectively as the world's only sovereign union of debtors, that we may finally have a platform of borrower coordination, and that we may collectively negotiate debt relief and access to new low-cost financing, if not grants, for our multinational and multi-dimensional development, as well as sovereignty-enhancing endeavors. Of course, many other endeavors have been undertaken. But the main point is that since my election in January 2020 and my taking office in December 2021, if I may not yet have become entirely worthy of the high trust placed in me by our member states and peoples all those years ago, what I do know is that I have sought, as I have kept seeking, and to the best of my ability, to continue deserving that trust at every single step of the way, and that I have served, as I continue to serve, with the loyalty, integrity, and selflessness to which I was sworn by a sacred oath. And I am proud. I am proud of the extraordinary progress that we have collectively made, of how far we have come together, of how fast we have transformed aspirations into reality. For despite all obstacles, we built something real. We breathed life into an institution that once existed only as inked signatures. We demonstrated that the countries of the South, when united by vision, are capable of designing their own models, their own programs, their own instruments. And none of that was simple. None of it was assured. And yet, we did it. But the time has come to face hard realities, clearly, soberly, without illusion nor excessive passion. For nearly a year, I have labored to keep this organization standing amidst existential uncertainty. The foundations exist, but they can no longer rest upon the selfless dedication of a few alone. For almost a year, not a single member state has paid its mandatory contribution in full. Even our host country, has yet to honour its commitment to cover the expenditures of our provisional premises. In the meantime, the Secretariat has continued to act without a budget, whilst I am prohibited as Secretary-General to accept grants and donations from third parties. And our staff whose loyalty is both a source of pride and a weight on my conscience, have kept the institution alive, without pay, often with anxiety, always with dignity. Even our partners and service providers, without whom it would have been impossible to deliver on the common program of member states and of associate members, today suffer the budgetary consequences of delays in payment as a result of the OSCE's situation. Staff, partners, service providers, they have all become, despite themselves, the unwitting patrons of an ideal that should be carried by nations, not by their employees. The issue, then, is not about a readiness to sacrifice by some. The issue is about accountability from others. And I can no longer, in good conscience, ask more of those who have already given so much. I can no longer preside over the slow erosion of what we have built, nor over the erosion of the trust of those who helped me build it. Last year, at the General Assembly, faithful to the spirit of my founding mandate, limited in duration, clear in scope, I offered my resignation. I was asked to continue. I accepted. But today, reality prevails. No individual determination can compensate for the absence of collective commitment. It is therefore with utmost respect, yet without equivocation, that I presented, earlier today, my irrevocable resignation from the office of Secretary-General of the Organization of Southern Cooperation. Going forward, I shall remain only for the time strictly necessary to implement whatever decision is made by the member states regarding the future of this institution, but no further. For the question is no longer whether I shall stay. That matter is settled. The only question now is this: should the Organization of Southern Cooperation be enabled to live fully, allowed to conclude with dignity, or made to suffer a dishonorable death caused by the neglect of those who founded it? There is no middle ground. Stagnation, expectancy, bare survival, all those must belong to the past. And, if so, two paths diverge before us. One path is to give the organization life through full contributions, sustainable financing, and the election of new leadership. The other is to close it, but with honor, settling all obligations, preserving its memory, and concluding in a manner that serves the future of South-South cooperation. One path is, of course, more painful than the other, yet neither path is shameful. Only indecision would be in such circumstances. But the choice itself does not belong to me. It belongs to those who hold the sovereignty to decide what the future of South-South cooperation, and indeed our world, shall be. This is why I have invited member states to an extraordinary General Assembly on the 15th of December to deliberate and decide between these paths. I am, once more, proud of what we have accomplished in record time. An organization that exists, proposes, acts, connects, transforms. A secretariat that embodies the aspirations of our peoples of the Greater South. Programs that show that initiative does not belong to the North alone. But the OSC cannot rest forever on the force of will of a single man, or on the devotion of a handful of civil servants. Its member states must take responsibility and ownership of this organization as the instrument that they created, or they should allow it a dignified end. From member states, I have asked only that the choice be made with clarity, with courage, and with conscience. As to our vision, the Greater South does not depend on a building, a budget, a name, or indeed a single institution. It lives in every act of solidarity, in every refusal to resign ourselves to all the hierarchies, in every gesture that affirms that our future can be built by our own hands, in accordance with our own aspirations, and in service of our own and of humanity in its entirety. I have served as fully as possible the mandate entrusted to me. I have nothing left to build with the present tools. What comes next for the OSC is now in the hands of the member states. To them belongs the decision between a future or the end. In the meantime, until my last day as Secretary General, I shall remain what I have always sought to be, a servant of our collective vision, faithful to the ideals that brought us together, conscious of the responsibilities that we bear before our peoples and before history. The journey is long and arduous, for our road is made by walking.